my screen. So यहाँ पर we were doing ionic bonding, right? So ionic bonding के अंदर we learned कि ionic bonding जो होती है it occurs when one atom transfers its electrons to another, and that creates a wait. Okay, so ionic bonding we learned about ionic. We learned that ions are charged particles and they're formed by loss or gain of electrons, right? So if an atom loses an electron, so it gets positively charged. If it gains an electron, it gets negatively charged. And the positively charged ions and the negatively charged ions, they attract each other and they form an ionic bond. Okay, so the positive ions and they are also called as cations. Okay, and negative ions are known as anions. And cations and anions join together to form an ionic bond. And the most common example of an ionic bond is that of sodium chloride, okay, which we talked about in the previous video, where sodium donates one electron to chlorine, and that makes chlorine negatively charged and sodium positively charged, and that forms an ionic bond. And ionic bonding occurs between metallic and non-metallic elements. Right? So this right here is an example of an ionic bond. Right? So we have atom one, which is a metal. Metals always lose electrons, and non-metals always have the tendency to gain electrons. And uh, by this loss of electrons and gain of electrons, it forms ions, and these ions just attract each other, and this forms an ionic bond. Right? So we have an ionic bond here. This is a compound known as lithium fluoride, and lithium being a metal and fluorine being a non-metal will form an ionic bond. सही है? अच्छा, जो भी ionic structures होते हैं ना, जो भी ionic compounds होते हैं, whether it's sodium chloride, lithium fluoride, potassium bromide, सारे जो ionic structures होंगे ना, any molecules which will form and which have ionic bonds within them, they will always form crystals. Okay, they'll always arrange themselves into a giant crystallized crystalloid structure. Okay, so right here we have a structure which is the structure of a sodium chloride crystal. So, and the structure is known as a lattice structure. इसको lattice structure क्यों कहते हैं? Because it's like a lattice जो होता है ना, lattice is like a very uh, patterned arrangement होती है atoms की, ठीक है? The patterned arrangement of atoms in a very organized manner is known as a lattice, right? So this is the lattice of sodium chloride. We'll talk about lattice क्योंकि सारे जो ionic structures होते हैं ना, जो ionic bonding होती है, for example sodium chloride हो गया, कुछ भी हो गया, जो भी ionic compounds हैं, they will all form lattices. ठीक है? Okay. So let's just learn about a lattice. What a lattice is. The lattice is basically just a crystal for an ionic compound. Okay, right here we have a very famous example of sodium chloride. इसमें you can see कि green dots जो हैं, they are representing negatively charged ions. So इस केस में negatively charged ions किसके होंगे? अगर हम सोडियम क्लोराइड की बात करें, तो negatively charged ions किसके होंगे? Chloride, right? So chlorine के होंगे. So we will be negatively charged chlorine atom, and then we have the positively charged sodium atom, right? So you can see a sodium is forming this bond with chloride. Sodium ions are forming this bond with chloride ions. This is an ionic bond. Similarly, this bond alternates with another chlorine atom, and this alternates with this chlorine atom. So इसमें basically होता है कि if you want to draw a lattice structure, the simple rule is कि you start with one ion, if you start with one ion, and उसकी जो opposite होगा ना हमेशा, उसकी जो opposite होगा, that will always be a positively charged ion. You get the opposite charged ion on it. So in order to draw a lattice structure, what you do is just draw a box. Okay, just draw this box. Okay, I don't know if you can this now. So you just draw this box. You know what? I'll just shift to the whiteboard. Okay, Rajiv. Okay, so in order to draw a lattice, so what you'll do is you'll just draw a box. Okay, ऐसे, ठीक है? Just draw a box, and इस box की जो corners है ना, ठीक है, इस बॉक्सेस के कॉर्नर्स होते हैं। सो इस बॉक्स के कॉर्नर्स पे you'll start with, फॉर एग्जांपल क्लोराइड को हम रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं एज पर्पल, राइट? तो पर्पल क्लोराइड, and then chloride makes a bond with sodium, right? So sodium on the opposite corner, ठीक है। अब सोडियम के ऑपोजिट क्या होना चाहिए यहाँ पर? क्लोराइड होना चाहिए, ठीक है। तो फिर से हम क्लोराइड बनाएंगे, राइट? अच्छा, अब क्लोराइड के यहाँ ऑपोजिट क्या होना चाहिए? सोडियम होना चाहिए। तो हम फिर से यहाँ सोडियम बनाएंगे, एंड इस तरह करते करते विल फॉर्म अ लैटिस स्ट्रक्चर, ठीक है। जस्ट हैव टू मेक श्योर कि ऑपोजिट कॉर्नर्स के ऊपर देयर शुड बी opposite corners के ऊपर there should be the opposite ion, ठीक है। So sodium at one corner, and then opposite corner पे there should be chloride. Okay? So we have sodium here, chloride here, sodium here again, and then we have chloride here. Right? अच्छा, these lattice structures होते हैं ना, they are very strong, ठीक है। और in lattice structures, एक मिनट, lattice structures होते हैं ना, they're like really strong, and they're only found by ionic compound, ठीक है। So this is all for lattice structures. Let's move on. So यहाँ तक समझ आ गए सबको? आई होप किसी को कोई मसला नहीं है। अजलान?
जी समझ आ गया।
ओके, सही। So this is just a comparison of an ionic bond and covalent bond. Ionic bond with there is sharing of electrons, and then covalent bond, sorry, ionic bond with there is the transfer of electrons, and then covalent bond with there is sharing of electrons, right? So ये भी एक और diagram है which is just comparing ionic bonding with covalent bonding. Right, so now in last bonding है, it's very easy, metallic bonding, ठीक है। So जो metals होते हैं ना, they are uh, you know metals are very good conductors of heat, electricity, सही है। Metals are shiny, they are sonorous, they have very high melting and boiling points, and they have they are very malleable and ductile, ठीक है। So we'll talk about these physical properties later on. बट जो मेटेलिक बॉन्डिंग होती है ना, उसमें यू नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड कि हाउ मेटल एटम्स आर अरेंज्ड। तो नॉर्मली जो मेटल्स होते हैं ना, उनकी क्या टेंडेंसी होती है? अजलान, डू दे हैव द टेंडेंसी टू लूज इलेक्ट्रॉन्स और टू गेन इलेक्ट्रॉन्स?
Again?
नो, लूज, ठीक है। मेटल्स ऑलवेज लाइक टू लूज इलेक्ट्रॉन, ठीक है, बिकॉज दे हैव less electrons in their outermost shell, so it's easier for them to lose electrons instead of gaining so many. तो मेटल्स है ना, हमेशा लूज करते हैं इलेक्ट्रॉन्स, एंड दे विल ऑलवेज लूज इलेक्ट्रॉन्स टू द नॉन मेटल्स, राइट? सो मेटेलिक बॉन्डिंग जो है, उसमें होता है कि वी हैव मेटल एटम्स, राइट? वी हैव मेटल एटम्स हियर, एंड दीज मेटल एटम्स आर पॉजिटिवली चार्ज, राइट? क्योंकि मेटल एटम्स जो होते हैं, दे उनकी जो इलेक्ट्रॉन्स होते हैं ना, दे आर लाइक they are freely moving. Say they're not like really revolving strictly around that atom. We freely move करते हैं. So they form like an electron cloud around the metal atom. So yeah, and this electron cloud, जो है ना, it acts like a glue to hold all of these metal atoms together, right? So if we read the metallic bonding, the metallic bonding involves a crystal lattice of metal ions surrounded by a sea of electrons, right? So for example, if you have like one sodium atom here, okay, you have another sodium atom here, you have another sodium atom here, and the one here, right? So you have multiple sodium atoms. So since metals have electrons which are delocalized, what is the meaning of delocalized? Anyone tell me delocalized का मतलब क्या होता है? देखो, delocalized है, ठीक है, means they are not localized. So electrons जो है ना, they are not strictly revolving around sodium, और अपने ना एटम्स के आसपास रिवॉल्व नहीं करते, ठीक है, दे आर फ्रीली मूविंग। सो इलेक्ट्रॉन्स जो है, दे आर पॉजिटिवली चार्ज, एंड जो एटम्स होंगे दे विल बी, सॉरी, इलेक्ट्रॉन्स जो है, दे आर नेगेटिवली चार्ज, एंड जो एटम्स होंगे दे आर पॉजिटिवली चार्ज, राइट? So बहुत सारे इलेक्ट्रॉन इसमें ना बीच में भरे हों, and they will be positively charged atoms. So a cloud of negatively charged electrons, a sea of negatively charged electrons, whatever you want to call it, okay, and they are all holding these positively charged sodium ions together, okay, and they're forming this lattice work known as a crystal lattice of metal ions. Okay, so this is how metallic bonding occurs. Simply, it is the force of attraction between the positively charged metal atoms and a sea of electrons. Okay, so the delocalized electrons act as an electronic glue and they hold the metal ions together. That's how metal atoms bond. And because metal atoms have so many free electrons, so that's why they are good conductors of heat and electricity. Because these electrons can, just move from one atom to another atom, okay, and they can conduct electrical charge, okay, and this gives rise to current. So this is another diagram which shows okay, how metal atoms are arranged and how they bond together in metallic bonding. So we have positively charged metal cations, and we have free electrons, and this electron cloud acts as a glue to hold all of these positive charges together, positively charged atoms are together. So ये कुछ properties है metal की which you guys already know. So metals जो होते हैं they are good conductors of heat and electricity. They are malleable and ductile. Malleable का मतलब होता है कि if you hit them really hard, so they can like they can change their shape. So yeah, and they're not really brittle. So yeah. So if you like hit them with a hammer, they'll just bend and they'll not break off. They'll not break into pieces. Unlike, for example, if you just hammer a piece of phosphorus, so that phosphorus piece will just turn into powder, right? So non-metals are very brittle, but metals are not brittle. And they are ductile. So ductile means that they can be bent. They can be bent. So you can see that they form sort of a spring using this metal, and that shows that metals are ductile. They can bend, and they can you can just hit them with a hammer and they'll just bend and they'll not really uh, break. See, malleable के मतलब होता है कि they are not brittle और shiny, they are shiny obviously. जब इन पे light shine करते हैं so they are very reflective and they are sonorous. What does sonorous mean, Aslan? Sonorous just means कि when you strike that metal, it makes a sound like ting sound नहीं आती जब भी आप किसी metal को strike करते हैं तो एक ting sound आती है.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's what sonorous means. So these are some of the properties of metals, and that ends our session. It was pretty simple. कल हमने जो है ना for the next session we'll discuss giant covalent structures and we can also revise bonding क्योंकि हमारा इस week का यही था कि we had to complete unit 2 और कल we'll also briefly go over moles ठीक है stoichiometry and moles. We'll start unit 3. So that's the end of our session today. If you guys have any questions, you may ask.